I'm Cynthia Myers Morrison, and I am with Food Addiction Institute and delighted to have with me today Claire Wilcox, MD, who is a board certified psychiatrist and addiction psychiatrist, associate professor of translational neuroscience at the Mind Research Network, and adjunct faculty at the University of New Mexico. She has worked in a variety of clinical settings, including a medical weight loss clinic and an eating disorder treatment facility, and she completed an internal medicine residency before her psychiatry residency. She's been awarded National Institute of Health grants for her research in addiction neuroscience and has published numerous academic works, including a textbook on food addiction titled Food Addiction, Obesity, and Disorders of Overeating. Oops, you can't see it. Oh, but it's beautiful and a beautiful blue. And Food Addiction, Obesity, and Disorders of Overeating. She was associate editor of the New England Journal of Medicine Journal Watch from 2017 to 2020, blogs regularly on Psychology Today, and has written for Santa Fe Reporter and Science in the News, among others. She's also an MFA candidate in fiction at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe. And welcome, Claire Wilcox. I'm just so thrilled to have you here.
Oh, thank you. I'm really excited to be here too. Thanks for having me.
And I'm going to put this one up, which I think will be visible. There we go. Rewire your food addicted brain. And tell me about your new book. It's just come out in the last few days.
I know, I can't believe I'm kind of full of terror and excitement at the same time. Yeah, it has come out. It just came out. My family texted me last night and said we got the book, so it's out. It is a book. So I had written the textbook that was mentioned before in 2021, and then gosh, around maybe 2 years after that, maybe 1 year after that, I just kind of started listening to the Food Junkies podcast because I had had my own little I won't own little slip back into overeating, and because I so basically not been eating sugar for 10 years and was feeling really good, and then kind of had my slip into overeating, and was feeling kind of sketchy about myself and started listening to the Food Junkies podcast and was just blown away. So I had written this textbook kind of in my own academic mind space and put all these articles together and just wanted to answer for myself, like, is food addictive and can addiction techniques be used to help people to sort of get stabilized on their eating. And then when I started listening to the Food Junkies podcast, I realized like there was a whole world of people that were thinking the same things and applying these techniques in their practices. And it just really opened something up for me personally and then also professionally. I really connected with a lot of the people that interviewed, very smart, well, decorated, not that that matters, but doing lots of research, just really insightful, knowledgeable people. And I thought, my God, there is a book in this podcast. So I ended up reaching out to Vera Tarman and Clarissa and Molly, and they sort of said, "Go ahead and write a book," and I was like, "Okay." Um, so I did, and have connected with them, and they're lovely. And yeah, so and sort of in parallel, at the same time, I was writing on a Psychology Today blog about eating disorders, and a publisher, found me on that Psychology Today blog and said, "Hey, do you want to write a book about eating disorders?" And I said, "Well, what about a book about food addiction?" And he said, "Okay." And so it just kind of all happened serendipitously. And it's a book really targeted to people who struggle, their family, also treatment providers are really going to benefit from the information in it as well. It's very, but it's designed to really help people, empower people with as much information as is out there. And there's a lot that isn't out there. Like there's a lot of science that needs to be done and that hasn't been funded yet, but there's a lot out there that has been done and a lot of consensus. So it's sort of putting together what is known, and naming what is not known, and giving people, sort of empowering people to make choices about how they want to move forward with their recovery. And so it feels like a really exciting, it's sort of something that I would have wanted to read myself, when I was just delving into this, how to get into recovery state of mind. Or 20 years ago was probably when it all started with the food. So yeah, or maybe longer ago, really. But anyway, yeah,
Well,
that's the
I am thrilled that you've written it and that's out in the world, and I encourage everyone to read it. This Rewire Your Food Addicted Brain, and the subtitle, Fight Cravings and Break Free from a High Sugar, Ultra Processed Diet Using Neuroscience. And your expertise as a psychiatrist, as a person who's experienced food issues. Um, I don't know whether you identify food addict. Yes, me
I
too.
mean, yeah, like yeah, I do. When we get the, I'm on the fence, like, because I'm such so rooted in psychiatry. I would like a DSM to provide us with a name, and then I'll use that name for sure. But I mean, in the meantime, what we have is food addiction, and based on the Yale food addiction scale, which is really well validated and great, and I hope it is, sort of used in the clinical realm in the near future. Um, definitely have food addiction, had food addiction. I mean, I'm in recovery, but yes, absolutely. At various points in my life, I have met criteria.
Could you share a little bit about your personal story? That often helps people identify too.
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah. So I quit drinking. I have a family, a lot of family members with, who drink a lot, smoke a lot, drink a lot, smoked a lot. And people who struggle with weight fluctuations in my family as well. So I'm sort of genetically loaded, and drinking got a little out of hand. So I ended up quitting drinking through AA when I was in my late 20s, and at the time was also struggling a lot with weight issues. Also smoked a ton of cigarettes, and so the alcohol came first, and then in its wake. I was left with kind of this evening binge eating stuff that, man, it was just so tenacious. Oh my God. And I mean, I'm a psychiatrist, I'm a researcher, I study the neural circuitry of addiction. That sort of came afterwards where I got obsessed with that. But, it just was like, it's crazy making when you know all the things and still, keep engaging in a behavior that's unhelpful. And so I think, what was hard back then is that food addiction was more fringy than it is today. The concept of food addiction was more fringy. And so I felt like, oh, I'm crazy to be thinking I'm addicted to food. And at the same time, I didn't feel purely like it was an eating disorder issue, and sort of the idea of eating cookies in moderation and things like that just felt way too difficult for me. So, which is kind of what the typical eating disorders paradigm asks for. So I felt really like kind of alone and confused. But over time, gosh, when was the first time? I mean, I ended up quitting sugar for 5 or 6 years. Then I went back for a couple of years, and then I really almost quit completely, except for a little dabbling in maple syrup in 2013. And when during the times where I wasn't eating sugar, it was like quantum change. You know what I mean? Just like, I feel great. I don't even want to eat, like I don't really want to eat. So that personal experience and the going back and forth about it helped me realize that, yeah, like for me, it's addictive. Certain foods are addictive. And so it's and yeah, so that's kind of the story.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I appreciate in the book how you create a real opening for looking at, and a very specific pattern for looking at the eating disorders, and do you have an eating disorder, with means to do that assessment,
Mm,
and at the same time, do you have food addiction, or do you have both? And
mhm.
I like the both and,
Mm.
that there were patterns that I engaged in that could have been identified as an eating disorder had they had that name at the time that I stopped doing them. But they
Yes.
didn't. And and yet when I think about my own history, I think about my first experiences with food and
Mm.
wanting more. And you address the volume eater in your book, and I appreciated that also.
Mhm.
Very, you know, you just did so many wonderful things in this book. So,
Oh,
so thank you,
thank you.
thank you, thank you. And you give room for harm reduction at the same time as identifying that for a food addict that is wanting to recover, that abstinence is a solution that really does work.
Yeah.
So how to make those those choices in our own behavior. So I salute you and celebrate you.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you.
So thank you, thank you. I heartily recommend reading this book. Well, then Dr. Hall had some celebrity at the time, not too long ago, about research and um, that failed to show that dopamine reaction was there in the research to a particular state in the brain. And I wonder if you would talk about your response to that research and how that could be so different than what others' research has proven that there is a reaction. So
Right.
would you talk
So,
about
yeah,
that some?
yeah. Yeah. So just to back up too, so Dr. Hall did a study in 2019 that's so helpful. He's done a lot of great research. In that study, he showed that people that were kind of that he had them come to the residential facility and he assigned half the people to an ultra processed food diet and half the people to a more a less ultra without ultra processed food in it. And that those who had the ultra processed diet gained weight over the course of this, I think it was 2 week study, and the other much more weight than the other folks did. So just a kind of proof of concept that ultra processed food slash high sugar food triggers its own overeating, right? And then he has done a lot of research in that realm of food addiction and ultra processed food. And then people were excited for the results from this study, which basically was looking at whether or not you could, the idea behind addiction is that you expose somebody to cocaine and their brain, a certain part of their brain, their reward center releases dopamine. And that's sort of a marker of an addictive substance. So the idea, everybody was excited to see like that he was going to do the same thing with shakes and look at a shake versus a non-ultra processed food and see compare the dopamine release in the brain. And what he found, everybody was kind of disappointed about this, is that the dopamine release was not that different between the two different substances, right, in a group of people. So there have been, one response to that might be, well, therefore food isn't addictive, which is just going backwards and not that helpful for anybody who has found relief from not eating sugar and wants to sort of spread the word for people to try it out if but also it's just not correct. It doesn't mean that food isn't addictive, and there's several reasons for that. So I wrote an article in The Hill where I addressed some of these things recently, an editorial. And in it, basically so one is that nicotine, and they talked about this in the study, nicotine also in these PET imaging studies did not trigger dopamine release like things like cocaine did. So, and do we not believe that nicotine is addictive? No, of course we believe that we know that nicotine is addictive, right? So, the other thing in this study that I thought kind of is important is that he chose a sample of people not based on whether or not they had food addiction. They were just a normal sample of people. So my question would be, well, what if we compared a group of people with food addiction, looked at that dopamine release? My guess is that the people with food addiction would have more dopamine release to high sugar ultra processed food. There are a lot of people that don't develop food addiction. Just like there are a lot of people that can drink alcohol, you know, the drink or whatever, a few times a week. Like there's a lot of people out there that can do that. There's even people that can smoke a cigarette once a month, which is it's rare, but they're out there. Um, so not everybody is going to get addicted to high sugar, ultra processed food. And really studying those folks, I think, would have been more effective. But I think the biggest thing too is, kind of circling all this and the neuroscience and everything, is that addiction is not defined by dopamine release. Like addiction is a very complicated set of uh, problems, and in the book, there's I sort of divided into three chapters of the neuroscience. Like the first chapter is that food causes release of dopamine, which causes conditioning or learning, which leads people to keep going back to the substance when they get exposed to cues. The second is that people learn to use food to regulate their emotions. And we start that at the age of 3. You know what I mean? Here, have a cookie, stop crying, or 0. And then at the third is that kind of these high sugar, ultra processed foods affect our impulse control. So the neuroscience is very complex underlying addiction, and you can't just say like, oh, it's all about dopamine. Like it's not all about dopamine. It's about all these other brain circuits. And really, the true measure of addiction is, do you meet criteria on the DSM? Like, do you have loss of control? Just like that's how we define addiction for alcohol and cigarettes and cocaine is, do you have loss of control? Like when you start, do you have trouble, not stopping? Do you have tolerance and withdrawal? I mean, that's we have documentation that people who overeat high sugar, ultra processed foods have withdrawal and develop neurobiological tolerance, right? Um, and do you use and are there bad consequences from the use? Definitely, right? Like overuse of high sugar, ultra processed food, all these health problems, obesity, things like that. So basically, the response that I would give to that question is that it's about much more than dopamine release, and that absolutely just because that one study didn't show dopamine release doesn't mean that food is not addictive.
Thank you for addressing that issue. It was like, really? What about
Yeah,
all those other studies?
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
I appreciate your clarifications and insights. So, what are some of the things that and a person can do if they think they might have food addiction? And what are the benefits of doing it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things to do. I think it's a kind of like dovetailing on that idea that, the neurobiology of addiction is incredibly complex. Coming at recovery from possible food addiction is complex. And maybe even before I go there, I should step back and say, even before doing something about it, is to figure out if you think that food addiction really does explain what you're struggling with. And so I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but there's sort of I have a chapter all about diagnosis in the book, and so to figure out if you have food addiction is not it. There's actually a great scale that's been validated called the Yale Food Addiction Scale, which I was given permission to include in the book, so you can kind of fill it out and see if you meet criteria and see if you have mild, moderate, or severe. And these criteria are based on the DSM. So again, it's based on what we know about addiction. And then also, but what makes it a little more complex than just your average like addiction is that start sort of restricting your eating or over limiting your caloric intake to the point where it's not helpful can actually, or eating disorder type behavior can actually fuel addictive behavior. So sometimes people who meet, criteria for food addiction are not meeting criteria for food addiction because they have food addiction, but are meeting it because they might have an underlying eating disorder. So I go into that a lot in the book. And like you said at the, onset, like sometimes it's both, right? And so it's not super complex, or it's not super simple. So sort of going through these, I include some assessments in the book and questions to ask yourself and kind of to look at, well, what is this a food addiction, or maybe I need to like get support around an eating disorder first and then kind of see what's left. Um, and then, but once that's, and I should sort of, just for people who don't really kind of know the background on this. So, um, eating disorder treatment is almost exactly the same as what I propose for food addiction treatment, to be completely honest. Behavioral support, like building community, making some changes in your eating in a stepwise fashion, or bigger changes all of a sudden, either way, whatever fits you best. But trauma, work. There's a lot of overlap in eating disorders, cognitive behavior therapy. Like there's so much overlap in the treatment for eating disorders and food addiction, but they differ in that, in a typical food addiction treatment paradigm, the idea is to kind of get rid of, either significantly cut back or get rid of the foods that are causing the addiction in the first place, that have rewired your brain into a space where you no longer have control. Whereas an eating disorder paradigm really focuses more on the restriction piece. Like they want to get people eating again in a balanced way, and they want people to not remove certain foods from their food plan, because the idea behind that is that it's just going to fuel more like starvation and restriction. So they're two different opposing, like that's pretty much the difference, right? And so sort of figuring out which paradigm fits better for you, I think is an important first step, because there are some people who might meet criteria for food addiction on the Yale food addiction scale, but actually have a severe anorexia that need stabilization and treatment for an eating disorder. So that's sort of something I go into in that one chapter. But once the addiction has been identified as an issue, and there's sort of a lot of things. One is to make changes in the eating, and so I have a food plan recommendations for people, but that's obviously easier said than done, right? So, and so there's a whole bunch of other tools that target all those parts of the brain that have been sort of destabilized by the food over the decades of eating up certain foods. And so those are kind of another big step, which includes like building community, getting support, sort of exercise, which causes all sorts of beautiful neurochemistry stabilizations, and things like that. And then third is just to like kind of, and this is part of an eating disorder treatment program paradigm too, is to just let go of the weight loss as being such a key goal. Like the weight, it's not about the weight. It's much more important to feed the brain, like get the brain all the nutrients it needs, healthy food. Like the second you start to think about weight, most people, most of us, we want to eat, right? So like the second, it's not helpful. Like food, with sort of removal of triggering foods, the weight loss just happens. So sort of to let that, um, and it's very hard to do, and that's why I provide tools about how to let that go as well. But sort of letting that goal go for now, because it's just not, it doesn't help with the food addiction, the craving, the obsessing. So.
Well, you added some things in the book in terms of sleep and
Mhm.
mindfulness and so many additional tools that, in addition to the book itself, you referred to a place where there are extra chapters. Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so I love the extra chapters. I kind of wish that there had been enough pages to include them. Because I also, I think that especially for providers, they would be helpful. So I encourage anybody who's like a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a coach, or anybody who's treating people with food addiction, to kind of access it. But yeah, the one of the chapters is about sort of treatment of comorbid eating disorders and food addiction. So, what to do if you have both, and a lot of people do. Like I definitely met criteria for binge eating disorder, and I met criteria for food addiction myself, right? And there's a lot of people that meet
Mm.
criteria for both. So sort of how to approach that problem and get the support that you need. And it kind of delves more into what I just talked about, the sort of there's this controversy, which really shouldn't be there. Like, we're not, that food addiction and eating disorders treatment are not at odds. They're pretty much the same. So, sort of trying to bridge that gap. And I talked about SunCloud Health, where Kim Dennis works, and quoted her a lot. She's also in recovery from both, and is a psychiatrist and I think she's also addiction certified, and she runs a program and she treats people with both eating disorders and food addiction and substance use disorders all together in the same facility. And so that chapter is really just talking about how this paradigm really could and does work. And let's just, let's all get together and, you know,
Move forward.
pool resources instead of being polarizing.
Mhm.
Um, and then the second one is about how to how to get help in an environment that is a little bit polarizing and confused, and where food addiction is still a little fringy, according to some people, but growing in popularity and getting increasingly validated by the research. So sort of how to establish a sort of treatment group, like how to get providers that are going to sort of support you in your goals. And so that I think is a useful chapter too. And it goes into, things like medication, do medications help? It talks a little bit about Ozempic, a little bit, antidepressants, all that kind of stuff. So,
And with Dr. Georgia Ede, when I studied with her, she talked about how important it is to stay with your medical providers and to keep them aware of how you are changing your food. So
yes.
that those medications may need to be adjusted rapidly, actually. So,
Yes, 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 very true. Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, I wouldn't say that the medical profession recognizes the effects of sort of what we're eating uh, very well.
mhm.
We don't really think about it. So I think, yeah, it's hugely important.
Need to keep those pieces together and
Yeah.
keep letting our medical professionals know what we are doing outside of their offices, so that they can help us address those things. Um, I I'm curious too about, is recovery truly possible?
Mm.
Because you make the case in your book that it is, which I firmly concur with.
Yeah. I mean, yes, like of course, right? I mean, I can certainly say that for myself, like the difference in my mental state and life and happiness between from today to previous times when I was still, actively abusing food is drastic. Like I feel like I never thought that I would actually be able to um not be constantly thinking about food, or not be, I mean, it's just like there's so much space in my brain now, there's so many room for other things, whereas before I was constantly thinking about food and constantly, I just don't think about it anymore. So I can say that for myself, yes. I can say that for so many people that I have, heard speak, like the Food Junkies podcast has a lot of personal story. There's at Overeaters Anonymous, which some people may choose to kind of be involved in. There's just, person after person that talks about their recovery and how great, like how free they are. And it really, like, freedom is, I think, a great word to describe how I feel today compared to before. Just like there's space, there's a life to be had. So, yeah, I absolutely think so.
in the Gray Sheeters Anonymous 12 Steps and 12 Traditions book, there are the 12 freedoms. And they are the freedom from craving, the freedom from this kind of obsession, the freedom to become who I am
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
many different aspects of that kind of freedom that you're just describing.
yeah.
So there are so many thousands of people out there in the world in different food addicts in recovery, food addicts anonymous, Gray Sheeters Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, and the various groupings from that are related to OA. So many different places. Uh,
Yeah.
Sugar and Carbohydrates Anonymous.
Yeah, I've
So
heard
many
of that
different
one. Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
allow different things in their eating plans. I mean, like I looked at your eating plans and I didn't see rutabaga, which I had for dinner last night.
Oh,
And
wow. I've never had it before. Interesting.
it's a wonderful solution to the desire for a potato.
Oh,
Comfort
really?
food.
Oh, how
It's a
sweet. Oh,
wonderful,
interesting. Okay.
but in small quantities, not large quantities like I might once have done. But they have little ones in the market. They're not giant,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Wheat germ wasn't in your food plan, but is in the food plan for some people. So there are
Yeah.
ways that they vary and differ,
Yeah.
but that people find the one that fits them, fits their
Absolutely.
needs.
Absolutely.
So the
Yes.
sweeteners you had mentioned, that some people just cannot tolerate sweeteners and caffeine,
Yeah.
dairy, but
Yeah.
other people can. And so
Totally.
it's nice to have that kind of continuum. And being a 78-year-old, I can say that on the continuum, aging does have an effect. What I could do then, I may not be able to do now.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So have you noticed, do you feel like you've had to get more like less permissive with your food plan with age? Is that what you're kind of
You
getting
know,
at? Or?
the sweeteners were things
Mhm.
that I used for 25 years. And in
Mhm.
more recent times, they are not necessary.
Yeah. That's
Now,
so
do I
interesting.
still have a sip of something from my husband when he's drinking artificially sweetened beverage? No
Yeah.
sugar, but artificially sweetened. Sometimes still, I mean, I confess still, and other people cannot tolerate them at all. So
Totally. Yep.
it's that finding a place. I needed to change from weighing and measuring to cupping
Mm.
because the quantity that I was eating before was too much, too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
but I loved it all the time that I did it. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's another one of those changes over time. So,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. That's, I think, another big message in the book too, is that there is no one size fits all food plan for anybody, and that the anything that we do at this point in our lives may not be what we do at this point in our life. I mean, things change over time, and
they do.
um, sometimes people go start out more like less permissive in their food plans and then become more permissive over time, and sometimes it's the other way around. I think it just is really so to in the book, again, with the support of Clarissa and Vera and Molly too, who've seen a lot more clients with food addiction, and treated them in that model, to kind of come up with this food plan that is that's both structured but also like not dogmatic, and
Mhm.
certainly not restrictive. Like if you can eat like chips, which I actually can eat chips. Like I really don't even care about chips. Like I can have two chips and I forget about them. Other people cannot eat chips,
Not even one.
right? Like they just lose it.
Mhm.
So it's like I just still eat chips because I'm like, I don't really care. Like it's just like eating I don't know, carrots or something for me. So
Right.
who knows? And there isn't, we haven't done a study yet to see like which food plans are best for which people. We don't know yet. So let's be as gentle as we can on ourselves, right? Like in the meantime, and get to that recovery. And yeah, that recovery is totally, totally possible. And I can tell you that I have had so many hopeless years. I mean, not just days, not just weeks, like years where it's like, it's not going to happen for me. I'm going to be stuck in this for, and then you're like done with it and you're like, what? Like, where'd it go?
That happens.
So it's really nice. Yeah.
Um, and that's such a good thing to hear. It truly is. What, in terms of specific steps to do, if you think you might have a food addiction and you want to be free from that food addiction, and you might have an eating disorder, what do you do first, second, third?
Mm,
How to create that community around you that is intergenerational and supportive and, you know, a nest for yourself. How do you do that?
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think one can go about it however one wants to. There's no yes, this first, then this. Um, and But I think one thing that's really important to start out with is just kind of self-compassion and letting go of the need to like fix yourself right now. I know that that perfectionism kind of stuff has plagued me and plagues so many of us. So letting go of the weight loss thing, just taking a step, okay, it's going to be a big change. It's going to take a while, and just sort of settling into that, and letting go of the weight loss goal and defining a new recovery goal, which might be something like, get free of the cravings, right? Like, what is a recovery goal that doesn't have to do about something like weight, right? Um, and um, and then kind of building a community you had asked. So that is super important as you start to make changes in the food plan, is to have a support network. And I feel like a lot of us, the world tells us that that food is not addictive, that we can eat a cookie. Why can't we eat just one cookie? Right? All those things. And so to have a supportive group around you that says, that may be true for some people that they can have a cookie. It's true for a lot of people that they can have a cookie. But is it really true for you? Right. And so having that supportive community that can kind of help you understand that that's not the case for all people, that there's science behind it. In my case, I needed to know there was science behind this idea, right? So whatever it is you need. And I think some of the, there's a lot of ways to build community. Some people can do the 12-step stuff, which is really effective and helpful for a lot of people. For some reason, the OA thing didn't click for me. And it could have been me like thinking that all these people were judging me for wanting to eat chips, or something. Like, I don't know. I'm not sure. But it didn't quite, I sort of always had this idea that the OA people wanted me to eat a certain way and I wasn't going to be able to do it. And whereas I did really like AA. So AA, like you could go to AA instead of OA. Um, but a lot of people find help in OA, and then listening to podcasts. So like I said, for me, Food Junkies podcast is a sort of community, and reading people's memoirs or stories of recovery. And that's one beautiful thing about OA, is that you can actually listen to stories of recovery, which can be really, really helpful and inspiring. So all that, and then you get to start to make the changes in your food plan, and getting a therapist or nutritionist. I mean, that can all be very, very helpful to sort of lay the groundwork. Somebody that is going to be sort of open to this idea, because not all nutritionists are, and not all therapists are open to this idea that there's certain foods that are triggering for you that you want to kind of remove, or certainly significantly cut back. I mean, I personally, most therapists I've seen have thought that idea was kind of a bad idea to remove sugar. And it's not and in my case, it actually is a very good idea, but I was not given that messaging from the therapist I saw. So I think finding somebody who's going to support this is important.
And Dr. David Unwin in Britain talks about the sugars holding hands, that
Mm,
those are the grains. And so for some of us, you mentioned in your book the processed grains. For some of us, it's all grains. And when I took that out of my eating plan, it was like night and day.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
took sugar and grains out. It was night and day. It was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's not everybody.
It's
I
not
look at
everybody.
other people and I think, wow, how can they do that?
Yeah. Yeah. I know. Yeah. And
They can.
I eat grains like,
Mhm.
so
And
it's,
it works for you.
it
Yeah.
does. Yeah. I have to be a little, I can't eat grains with abandon.
Mhm.
And I do talk about that in the food plan too, that if you're going to keep grains in to sort of not, to really, really, if you're going to eat them, to really eat lots of protein and fat and vegetables with it, because most people with food addiction are not able to eat grains without a little bit of craving getting triggered. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I find that myself. Like I need to portion on the grains
Mhm.
down, you
Mhm.
know. So,
Mhm. And that's something else you mentioned about portion control that um, David Wiss said something to the effect that, well, you shouldn't have to weigh and measure your food forever. That's not even possible. And I think, well, it may not be for me forever, but for 27 years, it's worked really well.
right? Exactly. I know,
So
exactly.
do I want to quit doing it? When I think, oh, and then what would you do? It's sort of like, well, someone had asked me about alcohol if I quit going to Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever organization was helpful to me at one particular time. What would I do? That hypothetical question to a hypothetical person. And the answer, would be, well, I'd shoot Demerol every day for the rest of my life. What? What? And it would be, I'd eat blah, blah, blah for the rest of my life every day. And I think,
Yeah.
and I love the fact that you call it ultra processed substances at some
Mm,
times, that you don't even call it food because some of those things are really not food. They're
exactly.
chemically
Exactly.
created, so
Yes.
well,
Agreed. I mean, I no, I think, and I think there's a really strong misconception where people say, well, you can't call food addiction addictive because we need to eat to live. And the answer is no, but we don't need to eat Twinkies to live. Like we really do not need to eat ultra processed foods to live. And in fact, they are taking years off our lives, studies show, right? So, yeah,
definitely,
yeah.
definitely. So, well, your book has recommendations by Anna Lemke, David Katz, Jen Unwin, Susan Pierce Thompson, Nicole Lavina, David Wiss, David Aaron Kessler, Chris Van Tulleken. I
Mhm.
would say that that's a huge group. And Vera Tarman and Molly Payne Shop and Clarissa Kennedy and Sweet Sobriety. There's Vera Tarman with the other two as Food Junkies podcast, and then Clarissa and Molly for
Yeah.
the Sweet Sobriety. You have luminaries in the field here. So, you
Thanks to Vera and Clarissa, who have made a community through their podcast. I mean, Vera, Clarissa, and Molly have made a community. Like, I wouldn't have like known to reach out to them, or had the guts to, but because of their support. So again, it's kind of coming back to what we all help each other, and what they've created has really made this thing possible. And Clarissa, by the way, did a lot of help on the book. I just want to name that as well. She and Molly provided a lot of the materials, the downloadable materials, and Clarissa actually did some of the editing, and gave me feedback and stuff. So
well,
they're lovely.
I'm so glad that you're giving kudos to them, to Clarissa specifically, and to them as a
Yeah.
collective, because they have created such a wonderful resource with hundreds of people that are interviewed over the years now, and such a reservoir of possibilities for people to touch base and see what happens, and to use your book, Rewire Your Food Addicted Brain, to make it possible in their own lives. I want to ask one more question, and I had mentioned this before about children
Mm.
and families and how to get this information out to younger people so that by the time they're ready to conceive the next generation, that they are at their own optimal health and well-being and weight? How do we get that information out to the families?
I know. Yeah. I mean, boy, it would be nice if we could, if there were public, if we as individuals had more of a influence in the public health slash political sphere, but we don't. And so given that, I think just the kids, our kids are exposed to high sugar ultra processed food at a really young age. So, we don't let kids drink alcohol or smoke cigarettes when they're two, but we do provide these substances to our children. More than 50% of the calories that our kids consume are high sugar ultra processed foods. So our brains are wired at an early age. So I think just sort of like as parents, I don't have children myself, but as parents, we can't control everything, right? Like we can't like make our kids eat a certain way, but we can certainly provide them with choices and we can give them tools. So something, Nicole Avena has written I've written a book about this and she has so many great ideas. But like, one thing is just to sort of do substitution work, like give our kids a frozen banana instead of a popsicle or, whatever it is, like trying to sort of offer things that are a little less. And I have to say that when I grew up, my family was actually ate pretty darn healthy. So for some reason, probably my genetics, so I remember when I was like a teenager, like friends would go out and have like McDonald's and fries, and I'd just be like, wow, this is so good. Like, this is really exciting. I get to eat.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, it was but even but I think a lot of our kids are exposed a lot earlier than and in high quantities, so just providing our kids with options.
Real choices and the reasons that make sense to them about why they would want to choose these better options. So if
Oh
they want to
yeah.
be more physically able to run that race or to do that thing in scouts, or to have their brain functionally at optimal capacity, not be sort of foggy brained and having fights and all those
Yeah.
types of things that really are changes for children. So,
And I think too, we um as parents, again, I'm not a parent, but I know it's a really hard job, right? Like, so the kid starts crying, you just want to have a little break. I mean, I can imagine, oh, I can only imagine, right? And what do? You know that if you give them something sweet, that they'll calm down and set them in front of the TV. And all parents, we all know that that's not the best thing for our children, but we do it, right? Because we need a break. But finding alternative ways to teach our kids how to self-regulate, and it takes extra time and extra effort, and but the more we can do that, the better off our kids will be able to learn that it's not to use food to feel better. So
and modeling that ourselves on a
yeah,
consistent basis, which really, and speaking about it, that we're choosing these behaviors as opposed to those behaviors, so that they hear it, it goes in some way for
yeah,
future reference, even if it's not right now.
yeah,
And Mike Collins, I interviewed, and I love his story about his wife. He doesn't know how she was convinced to do it, but they didn't eat sugar and processed food during her pregnancy, the entire pregnancy. And they were
yeah,
both healthy before they conceived their twins.
yeah.
And so the twins didn't have any sugar for the pregnancy. And then for 6 years in their lives, they had no sugar.
Mm.
And he had always been told by his mother that he had a little halo around his head, that he was his mother's little angel. But he had never seen that demonstrated in his children until they had sugar the first time. And he went in to kiss them goodnight, and they had little halos around their head from the sweat coming off
Oh,
sugar
wow.
consumption.
Wow. Wow.
So I think of that and I think, oh my gosh. And
Yeah.
the Coob, we didn't talk about hypercataphia this time, my favorite
Yeah.
word, but Coob talking about that getting to the place where sugar doesn't help you, it just keeps you from falling into the abyss. That's all,
Yes,
you know.
yes, absolutely. It's just a yeah, patch up. And it causes overconsumption of it causes you to need it, right? Like so it feeds itself. It's a spiral in a bad direction.
Downwards. Down.
Downwards. Totally. Yeah, agreed.
This book is a spiral upward. It is the answer. So, rewire your food addicted brain, fight cravings, and break free from a high sugar, ultra processed diet using neuroscience. Dr. Claire Wilcox, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been so
Oh,
great. Thank you so much for having me.
so much. Thank you. We thank you from Food Addiction Institute, and Albuquerque, New Mexico is absolutely blessed to have you there.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a real pleasure for
Me
me.
too. Me too. Thanks.